growing up and your parents gave you something really practical for Christmas, like a new sweater, and you were super bummed because like you had your heart set on whatever like the latest and greatest new toy was, and you just knew when Christmas break ended and you went back to school, everybody else at school was gonna have that hot new toy? That was the worst, wasn't it? And then you grew up a little bit, and what did you start asking for Christmas? You started asking for practical gifts for Christmas because all of a sudden you realized that what you really needed was a new sweater and not whatever the shiny new toy on the market was at the time. This debate is kind of like that scenario for me. Mobile credentials are the shiny new toy of the access control industry, right? Marketing for mobile credentials would lead you to believe that they're everywhere and anywhere. Like they're the next big thing. They're the Furby of my generation. And if that's like a little too old for some of y'all, maybe like the Xbox of yours. But when everybody's telling you that like everyone wants this thing or this product, like the hype feels really real, doesn't it? The reality is less than 5% of the market's even utilizing mobile credentials today. So no, all of your friends don't have this shiny new toy yet. Look around the room. What's everybody wearing? What are y'all wearing? A badge, right? A physical badge. That's interesting. Why are we wearing physical badges in the room? I'll tell you a few reasons. Number one, it helps to visually identify who's at this conference. Who are you? Do you belong here? Number two, it creates a sense of community. I mean, immediately when you bump into somebody else wearing the same badge as you here, you feel more comfortable chatting with them in the elevator or picking up a conversation, right? You belong to the same group of people. Number three, it's really helpful when you had too many beers the night before and you met somebody and then you bump into them in line for coffee the next morning. Guess what? You can remember their name. Like, super helpful. So, inevitably, and she's already alluded to it, at some point today, my opponent will probably cite some security concerns around the ID issuance process. And she'll probably cite the long and tedious and time-consuming process that it takes for a cardholder to get a physical badge as compared to a more frictionless process to issue a mobile credential. But let's be real, we're not up here talking about app-based mobile credentials, right? Or the Bluetooth ones, we're talking about wallet credentials. So let's compare apples to apples. Let's talk about good badge issuance processes and updated software applications that allow customers to do this in a single step. Gone are the days of 20 years ago when people had to get their photo taken, go to HR to get a badge printed, walk it down to security, get it activated in another system, so on and so on. There are systems out there that do this in a single step, no hassle to the end user, it's not that much of a burden. I am very glad to hear Melissa cite the 28 days for somebody to report a lost or stolen badge, because I would be very surprised if somebody on our organization took longer than 28 minutes to report one. And here's why. Organizations that don't use physical ID badges correctly might have this problem, where people don't notice that they lost their badge or it was stolen. But if you're going to use a photo ID badge, you're going to use it as part of a visual security policy, meaning that everyone must wear their badge while they're in the building at all times. So when I walk in the building and don't have my badge, how long does it take me to realize that I don't have my badge? Not long at all, right? Plus other people notice right away. Furthermore, the more things you use that card for, the more value it has to you, right? So if I'm using it to open a door, if I'm using it to sign on my PC, if I'm using it to print stuff or copy things at the office, if I'm using it to buy things in the snack corner at my office, whatever it might be, the more things I use it for, the more value it has to me and the less likely I am to go very long without reporting it. The reality is companies need physical IDs for visual security. Lawmakers agree. Here's a few examples. In Pennsylvania, Section 809B from Department of Health requires all healthcare workers wear an ID badge. Connecticut Public Act 1132 requires the same thing. State of Missouri requires state employees must have a state ID badge that includes a recent photo. In the city and county of Denver, Colorado, entry to or exit from city and county facilities requires ID badges. Personnel at Los Angeles County Department of Health Services must display ID badges and identify themselves upon request. In Oklahoma, Canadian County mandates all staff wear identification badges. North Carolina Department of Transportation requires all employees wear ID badges, and all USPS employees must wear and visibly display a photo ID while employed or on duty. I could go on, but honestly it would be kind of exhausting, and I feel like you get the point. So not only do many facilities like this actually require these or mandate ID badges, but there's tons of examples of organizations where you can't even bring your mobile device inside. So if I'm going into a manufacturing facility, for example, and they don't even allow me to carry my personal mobile device with me, how helpful is a mobile credential? It's pretty much useless. And the same thing goes for healthcare organizations where there's areas that you can't take your phone, or other types of government agencies. At the end of the day, mobile credentials might seem really cool, but if physical badges didn't work as an identifier for security, why would so many places still require and mandate them across the country? The reality is, photo IDs are not going away. Not today, not tomorrow, not even 5 years from now.
We've got two very compelling opening statements by both.
One of the biggest challenges that physical cards have, I mean, undoubtedly, I think we all probably know this, is the security, especially as it's associated with technology cards. So how easily can you duplicate a card? We've all watched a million videos of people cloning cards. You all know you can go to Home Depot and buy something where you can clone a Prox card. We all probably have skimmers. This is a technology conference in the security industry. All right, so like we know this caveat, this has existed in technology cards for years. And this will probably continue to always be a risk of technology cards. And so we'll constantly have to evolve and add new methods of securing those technologies, more secure encryption options, all that stuff over time. But I think that's, at the end of the day, probably the biggest risk of a physical card, right? So having things in place that can mitigate or automatically deactivate, let's say lost badges or duplicated badges or whatever it might be, from a systems implementation standpoint is really important to an organization. So they can try to eliminate that as much as possible. The other challenge, to be frank, is just staying ahead of the idea that physical IDs are somehow inferior or inadequate. Earlier today, I was talking with somebody and he said, "Oh, you're speaking," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be in the debate this afternoon." And he's like, "Which side are you on?" And I was like, "Physical IDs." And he's like, "Did you choose that?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I chose that. I'm very excited to talk about it." And so I think that especially in the younger generation, I mean, Apple, congrats to them, they did a great job, especially as they got mobile in the college and university market fast. Did a great job of brainwashing that generation that your phone is everything, and that is all you need in the world. But at the end of the day, it's actually not. It's not that inferior. It's not an antiquated technology. It's not going away. And people need to easily and cost effectively, which I really hope we'll get into a discussion about cost today, identify who belongs and who doesn't belong, okay? When you have hospitals, schools, government agencies, places where there's people coming and going from the building all day, every day, how do you know the difference between a high school senior and a 21-year-old that doesn't belong in the building? Like, quite frankly, when we hired Robbie, he looked like he was 15. So, like, he could have easily walked in any high school. And so these places where the visual ID element of an organization's security practices are so important and honestly so cost effective, the ID badge is going to stay relevant there for a very, very long time to come.
Steal a lyric for some of the Swifties out there. It's us, hi, we're the problem, it's us. This industry, and my opponent very eloquently said, we've got a problem with the way that we use credential technology and how it communicates to the device, and we know it. We put out communication about it. Buyer beware, this is what happens when you buy this card. But then we look at our bottom line and say, ooh, I'm not ready to walk away from that putting me in the black, and then it's gonna put me in the red if I don't sell it. And so we as an industry are the barrier to this adoption, right? We've got all these legacy systems that are running on old technology that we know are insecure, and we give very limited paths to the partner, to those end users to be able to migrate their systems to a new path, to mobile. Some of them have already realized and have put their money aside to do this because they've seen the security gap. We have a customer who had this problem and immediately had their badge cloned and watched a female badge be presented while this woman was on vacation and a male walk in the building. Immediately, these guys are putting capital funds to upgrade their system, and they're going onto mobile because it validates identity. It's not an identifier only. Yes, they're using both credential types. But how do we mitigate this, I think, is the other piece. We're good at providing education, we're good at giving the buyer beware speech, but we gotta put our money where our mouth is here. and we need to help end users migrate and update their systems. You might have seen a little program from Wavelengths called AcceleRISE, where basically we're giving free readers in exchange for wallet credentials. These are the types of things we need to think about as an industry to move us forward and get into these technologies that are more secure than they are today.
I think, honestly, a hybrid system is probably the only way that I see mobile credentials having a space, especially in a lot of the verticals that we talked about earlier. So if you want to have success in K-12 schools, state and local government agencies, healthcare facilities, for all the reasons we talked about visual security, hopefully again we'll get to talk about cost, I would say that this would keep a photo ID, a physical ID badge, being at the forefront of their minds as something that they can quickly and easily implement. All right, not everybody prints money, okay? The federal government might, but the rest of the customers that you work with, they're not printing money every day, okay? And so they're looking for cost-effective solutions that can help them increase their security. And at the end of the day, photo ID is a very cost-effective and affordable solution for all verticals. So that said, Melissa's touched on, all right, what about my user experience? What about demand? What about when I forget my badge and I need some way to access the building? In that type of scenario, I think a mobile credential as a backup credential is great. I think that it's a really easy option on Saturday when I show up to work and I forgot to bring my ID badge and I have to get in the office for me to use a mobile credential to access that door opening. Although that said, most access control products have some type of app where you can do that from there too, and you don't even necessarily need a mobile credential at that point. But to me, I think that it also makes sense mobile credentials probably have a great place in like multifamily housing. Places where you don't need to really like identify to the public, I am this person. Like when I walk in my house, I don't expect to have to show ID, right? So same thing if I'm in like an apartment community or if I'm walking into a gym, I might want to present something to validate that I have an active membership before I get in, but it doesn't necessarily have to be worn. I'm not going to wear that while I'm on the treadmill, right? So there's markets like that where a mobile credential makes sense, but outside of that, I think it's just a supplement to the physical ID. And I think that the better we can talk about them coexisting and working in tandem, the more of a reality we're actually living in. Because it's one or the other type of model is just silly. Like, it's not practical, and it's just not going to happen anytime soon.
So, like any good software product, you build it, you put it in the market, you let your customers use it, and then you listen. And you hear what they have to say about what you put into the market, and then you iterate on it, and you make it better based on their feedback and based on what they need. And this is exactly what's happening with the wallet credential. It went into the market in 2021 in the university space. It's now going into the market in the corporate space. As more people understand what it is, what it does, how easy it is, there are more and more industries saying, give me that, I need that now. And so what you're starting to see, and make it even easier as far as a provisioning perspective goes. So you're starting to see it already change and iterate because it's a software product, right? So it's the way that it's provisioned is being changed, where you would simply send an email to the user, they add the credential to their wallet, ta-da, they're in the door. You're seeing it be built for visitor management, so we can apply it into the visitor management space and drive incredible efficiency and experience there. You're seeing it driven into the multifamily space, where you've got multiple keys in a single device that you can share across your family and not have to pay for 10 of them. Not that any of you have 8 kids yet. But you're also seeing health clubs, gaming systems, retail really understand the benefit of the credential, and that the more you put in that wallet, the more people are going to use it. And so I think those are a couple of the big ones. From a physical credential perspective, I think really what we'll start to see here is more interoperability across the physical credential across multiple devices. Whether you use it for logical access and you start to follow the FIDO standard, whether you use it to get into, you're in a contact environment, I think those are the places where you'll start to see physical potentially grow. There's not a ton after that because it's a hardware product, right? So those are some of the big ones I think on the software side. And as we continue to have more and more people on the wallet credential, you'll continue to hear more and more feedback, and I see it, getting in deeper and deeper into each of these industries as well. I should think about 2 things. An identifier is not the same as your identity. It doesn't determine who you are. And your name tag should not be your key. Does anybody still have brass keys? Oh man, some of these Allegiant and ASA people get these guys keypads so they can get oh, Lord.
I got both.
Oh, even better, thank you. I feel better. But truly, you know, sorry, you just threw me off. Damn, there's my 15 seconds. But your name tag should not be your key. So if you have a brass key or you put your address on it, you write your address on your key, you drop it on the ground, somebody picks it up and goes, oh, that's Jimmy's house over here, I'm gonna walk in. No, you don't do that, because you just gave somebody access to your house. Same thing with the physical badge. You print it, you put your brand on it, you drop it, somebody knows where you are, they find it, they pick it up, they walk in. Your name tag is not your key. Is there a need for visual identity in buildings? Yes, there is, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that we actually agree that there's a hybrid environment here. But the mobile device and the wallet credential is not the backup credential, it's the first credential. Because 90% of you have your phone in your pocket. And if you can raise your hand and tell me you have your access badge in your pocket, I will give you a high five and maybe take you out for a beer. But you don't. Well played. Well played. I love it.
Right here.
So the wallet credential really becomes the first credential, and yes, there is a place for a physical badge as the backup badge in this scenario. You know, I think the other interesting point that was made is, you know, the more you use your physical badge, the more convenient it is. How many of you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is pick up your physical badge and attach it to your pants? Go ahead, raise your hand. No, you pick up your phone and you turn off the alarm clock. And then you pick up your phone and you go, what are my meetings today? And then you get in your car, you unlock your car, you maybe even start it with your phone. Then you get a coffee and you walk up and you pay for it with your wallet. At no point there is your access badge involved. So the more you put things in your wallet, the more you're going to use your phone. So that adoption becomes key here. You know, the other piece of this is around security. We have locked down digital assets. How many two-factor authentication pieces do you have when you get into your computer? How many people have to put in a PIN code to get into your computer, et cetera? I just restated that twice. But we have locked down digital assets, but we have not locked down physical assets. And what we do with the physical badge is we give people access without true identity to get into those facilities. And so, yeah, your name tag is not your key. Your identifier is not the same as identity.
That my team has badges on out here. I'm very proud of y'all. Okay, so one of the biggest things she touched on was an identifier not being your identity. I'm not going to say that I even disagree with that. But let's just imagine a scenario where Melissa and I work at the same company. Okay, so first scenario, we wear physical ID badges to work. So I work at a company, Melissa does not. We walk into the office, she tailgates in behind me, I've got a physical ID badge on, and she does not. Our policy is that everybody's got a physical ID on at all times. What happens when somebody sees her in the hallway and she's not wearing an ID badge? Well, if they don't suck at their job, they're likely gonna go up to her and ask her, like, hey, are you supposed to be here? Can I help you? What's the situation with your ID badge, right? So at that point, there's gonna be an interaction where they can then determine if she belongs there or not. Now, if we work in a company where my company uses mobile credentials and no physical IDs, same scenario happens. I show up to work, I walk in, I use my mobile credential to get in instead of my badge. Melissa and I look the same, right? Like, how is anybody supposed to know whether I belong there, or Melissa belongs there, or nobody belongs there? So if I'm at like a school or some type of entertainment facility where there's tons and tons of people, how do you know at first glance whether I'm the good guy, the bad guy, I'm supposed to be there, I'm not supposed to be there, I'm a parent, I'm not a parent? We had a school district in Mississippi this year that implemented visual IDs in the fall, and it was the first time that their high school students were wearing badges every single day. Parents and teachers weren't psyched about it on day one, but by a couple days in, everybody was on board. Second semester, 22-year-old new student got on a school bus, rode it to school, got off at the school as if he was a new student, walked in the front door, immediately stopped by the staff at the front entrance. Where's your student ID badge? Super easy interaction, didn't take a lot, brought him to the office. He was visibly uncomfortable. He was there to traffic students. Not good, right? Pretty serious security risk. And just because he wasn't wearing a badge, they were able to mitigate that risk almost immediately. Okay? Now, we could talk about all the reasons that he got on the bus. That's a different debate for a different day. All right? But in this case, they were able to implement something super cost effective that really, really helped their school in the long run. And you can duplicate that across all kinds of verticals. This isn't just specific to K through 12, but that visual identifier really does matter. And cost effectiveness matters too. So we haven't really gotten into this, so I'm gonna dive in just a little bit because I've heard debates about how expensive physical credentials are, and man, I love disproving them. Like, it brings me so much joy. So I'm happy to do that for y'all today, but we did the math on this, and a printed, personalized plastic card runs about $673 on a smart MyFair card. That includes the card printer and the supplies to print it, the ribbons, you name it. So we're gonna choose a middle technology here, not like the most advanced card technology on the market. So let's round up and make that $7 a badge. For a company with 1,000 employees, you're looking at $7,000 to badge all those people. Let's just say you wanna account for 20% attrition, people losing their badges, needing to have them replaced, having to get a new badge every couple of years. You're still only looking at about $8,400 with 20% attrition. So over the course of 3 years, a facility like that would really only spend about $17,000. Let's just say we add $1 for a lanyard and we give everyone a new lanyard every year, that's still 20 grand. When you look at mobile credentials and the costs and the market, I'm gonna go with $15 as like an easy number, and I promise you, I've seen them advertised for way more than that to an end user. Same company, 1,000 employees, $15 per cardholder per year forever and ever and ever and ever. As long as they wanna use it, they're gonna keep on paying for it.
Melissa, how do you handle a company-provided identity on a personal phone?
Good question. I don't know your name. Colin, good question. So I think that a lot of our customers have this, and they either are high security solutions where they issue 2 phones, and so they're using, their work phone and putting their wallet, their credential into the wallet on their personal phone. Or most organizations, it's bring your own device, and it hasn't really become an issue. And in that case, issue them a plastic credential and they can attach it to their belt every day and use it. No, good question. Yeah, and I think that's also the beauty of the way that it's iterated is you don't need an app anymore. You just get an email, you get your credential, and it goes right into your wallet, which is standard on your device as well too. So, good question.
What other questions do we have?
I'm Avalon with Meta, and I was curious for Melissa about if I wanted to get, say, like a flip phone, or I wanted to just go old retro and not have internet access, would I still be able to use something like a mobile credential if I had an older phone, or even say a newer phone, like the newest Apple or something comes out, which I don't know if it will, but if it comes out, will it be easy to implement mobile credentials onto that or onto something in the past as well?
No, so I mean, this is the place where at that point you've got to evaluate as the facility owner, the security decision maker, what makes sense for your user base, right? If you have a whole bunch of people that are on flip phones, you're not going to be able to go to mobile. If you have a whole bunch of people that have the most up-to-date phones with NFC and they have wallet, they have BLE, then you can go to mobile. But it's not historical. And when you think about the people in the workforce and the percentage of people that have a mobile device, I think most people are in that mobile camp too. But good question.
With badges, have you found with retention or people like coming back that they are still using that badges, or are they to hand them in? What have you seen with that? Because with mobile credential, you can turn it off and almost immediately they're not allowed back into that building.
Yeah, it's a good point, and we talk about this all the time. One of the biggest security flaws with an ID system that doesn't talk to an access control system, which is what a lot of is out there in the world, is the risk of credential overflow. So that happens when you've got more active cards in your system than active card holders. How does that happen? I leave. I don't work there anymore. Guess what? Nobody told security. My badge is still active in the access control system. So when your badging and your access control system are tied together and tied to your HR database, guess what? I leave the company. What am I not getting anymore? A paycheck. Guess what else? ID system just got updated. Lindsay's no longer active. Guess what else? My card access privileges also got deactivated at the same time. So if you implement a system well, you can mitigate that risk for sure. If you implement it in like these old school, very separate, disparate systems that don't talk to each other way, then yeah, I mean, you're definitely going to run into that problem.
Lindsay, I'm curious as to how you would combat someone who might put forward to you that obviously with physical cards there's going to be elements of cards being damaged, lost, broken, whatever, which could contribute to waste. Cards that are thrown away, deactivated, are removed. In an ever environmentally friendly world that we live in, how do you combat an argument that obviously moving to a mobile credential removes the risk of further damage to the environment, carbon footprint, etc.?
Man, I was hoping someone would hit me with some sustainability. It feels good right now. I'm excited about it. I mean, it's kind of like being like a Republican in a political debate on CNN when you got to answer to how do you deal with sustainability and you're talking about plastic cards. So at the end of the day, there are obviously sustainability concerns with plastic, okay? You're comparing a plastic card to something that's issued on a mobile device. Like, this goes without saying. And I can tell you that there's companies out there that are making eco-friendly cards, because there are, and they're reducing the carbon footprint of those PVC cards and the technology cards, and they're still able to be printed on, and people can use them in their systems and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, like, most of the time when we quote those for customers, they end up not choosing them, because they typically end up choosing the more cost-effective option over the more sustainable option. And so that's just the unfortunate reality we live in. I think you'll continue to see strides as it relates to plastic card manufacturing and ID accessories and being more eco-friendly as the demand continues to increase. But until demand is like totally there, people will still keep buying what's cheaper. At the end of the day though, to put this in perspective and like make people feel better about the impact of your plastic cards, a PVC card has a carbon footprint of 20 grams, and a cup of black coffee has a carbon footprint of 29 grams, and a banana is 110 grams. So if all of you ate one banana less per year, that would be like if you had 5 plastic cards. So it's just not that big of an impact in the grand scheme of things that are important for us to be discussing.
I like bananas.
I know, well, you just gotta give up one.
Question for the both of you, and it goes hand in hand. So if you have a customer that has a certain budget that they're working with, and you're obviously the go-to because it's more cost effective, how do you then stop that customer from leaving once they realize that that cost effective decision may have not been the best, given issues they're having with people continuing to lose badges or lanyards, whatever, they're having to constantly put in money to replace them? Once they go to you and they say, hey, this is the issue, we now want to solve it using mobile credentials. But now the issue is that, people's phones are dying and they're not able to access, areas during the day and just everything that goes into a phone. Because aside from what you're adding to it, an iPhone is an iPhone. And we all know every year iPhone upgrades and yours slows down. So I'm trying to understand how you guys bounce off of each other when a customer is like, oh, this doesn't work for me. How are you then solving the issue for the customer, saying, my solution is not the only way that I can fix your problem. These are the other things we know that are issues with our product, and this is how we can get around it in those certain situations.
Sure. I think the beauty of it is that when Apple designed the access credential and the wallet, they basically determined that when the phone dies, the badge still works. So if your phone dies, you can still get access. That's not a problem. So I think it's the other nice part of developing products with people that are concerned about the user experience and listen to people in the industry that they build them with. So that was really great. Did I answer all of your question there?
I don't think, like, I just heard, I don't think any of us do that.
Any phone, Samsung phone, Google phone, or Android phone, or Apple phone, all of them. Yep.
Katie, do we have time for one more question?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Lindsay.
No, that's okay.
Go
So
for it.
you kind of asked, like, at the end of the day, if cost effectiveness isn't the only thing on the customer's mind. At the end of the day, if you're selling on cost effectiveness alone, like, you've already lost yourself the deal long term and probably the customer, no matter how affordable your solution is. So that should never be your sales strategy. Take note, salespeople on my team that are here. But I think that when you think about a card, most of the time, I mean, we see about 97% of our customers that purchase an ID system end up doing at least 2 additional things with that card within 2 years. And so when you're working with them and helping them implement those solutions and those systems that are going to use the badge, it's all about creating a seamless experience across applications and helping them see the realities of what else can I do with it. I mean, sure, it visually identifies me and that's great, but what can I do next? Like, what's the next step? And bringing additional value that way.
Actually, I do have a question for Lindsay. So the example you brought up with the 22-year-old going into the Mississippi school,
Yeah.
Let's kind of flip that, because let's say that individual did print out their own badge. As janky as it might look on an old ink printer or whatever, what would it be to stop that as the badge is now the identifier and that individual was allowed to go into the school because he looked like the gentleman in the front, where he was young enough where he can't, a person like a high schooler has a badge of low quality and, you know, to the untrained guy or the normal individual could have done, and what would have been the stopping point of that individual there versus having a mobile phone saying like this individual is this, and you have somebody checking, and we can verify that, oh, his phone is not the credential, or the credential on the phone does not match anything in the system.
Sure, I think it's a fair question. I think that if you design a really shitty ID badge, then it's pretty likely that somebody can go make a copy of it pretty easily. I mean, let's just face facts here. So, I mean, at the end of the day, people need to design badges with security elements to them, and they need to add, there's all kinds of great things you can add to your card that would reduce the likelihood that it would be duplicated. Anybody in this room who's on the ID side of the space would love to grab a beer and talk about it with you. But there's tons of things you could do that even to like, not the completely untrained eye, but common sense, and then the staff that was there that was trained on here's what our ID badges look like would know, like, hey, that's not the same thing as the plastic card that our students are wearing. Plus, they all had them on custom lanyards too, and so he would have had to have a custom school-issued lanyard, which also probably wouldn't make sense for this random person. So there's a lot of things that you can put into your badge design element, the ID accessories that you choose, all of that to increase the security level of it and help reduce the likelihood that it will be duplicated. I mean, it's a fair question.
I'll finish the same way I started. Consumers have been carrying their access to planes, trains, and automobiles in their pocket for years, in their wallet specifically. This is why consumers expect that their mobile phone gives them access to their facility, specifically their wallet. You've heard us talk for a long time about security plus convenience, and we're here. We made it. Way to go, everybody. The wallet credentials bring this to the table, and when Apple and Google say, we'd like to bring our wallet to your industry, you've made it to be mainstream, which is where we are. Now, physical and wallet will coexist. Nobody's denying that. The question is, which one is poised more for the future? And so the argument is, we need true identity validation, and we need to drive operational efficiency into the businesses. And wallet allows us to do that. Talk a little bit about cost here. I think the question is, how much is your security worth to get true identity? Do you want to go with the lowest cost option, even though that's not true, in my opinion? Do you want to provide physical badges, or would you rather have a piece of software that is a recurring revenue that allows you to basically offload your entire credential process the same way you do with access control as a service in the cloud? You use software to replace all of the pieces of the workload that happen around credentialing when you go to mobile. So I'll leave you with one thing, two things. Your name tag is not your key. Don't put your address on your brass key. And your identifier is not the same as identity. We have locked down our digital assets so well, but we have to do it with physical, and mobile allows us to do that.
Y'all, physical ID badges aren't going away. Thankfully, Melissa already made that point for me and so eloquently stated it in her closing. But in fact, in many vertical markets, like we talked about earlier, they're actually mandated and required that they wear physical ID badges. So I cited numerous examples of that at the start of today. But here's a few reasons that we covered of why I feel like physical ID badges are so important to an organization's security. So number one, most important, visual security. We've beat this horse to death, but without a physical ID badge, what identifier signals to other people that you belong here? Mason in the front row, quite honestly, could be 18, and he could go to high school, but he's not, right? He's a grown adult, and if he walked into school that he didn't belong, somebody should be able to identify that immediately and know that he doesn't belong there. Honestly, she talked a lot about like convenience and usefulness of your phone and using it for multiple things, but ID badges are really freaking useful too. You can use an ID card for so many things, and from a compatibility standpoint, it's very easy to choose card technology and card designs that allow your badge to be compatible with multiple systems that already exist at your facility. And the reality is your customers can't just rip and replace all the hardware that they've already invested in over the years to make it work with a mobile credential on day one. We already determined they're not printing money. Cost does matter. And so you can use an ID card strategically and make good choices in the badge design and the technologies that you use to allow it to be compatible and useful for all the systems that an organization is using. The cost thing, we won't dive into it, but if anyone wants to see some math, I'm sure Melissa and I would love to chat with you afterwards. But at the end of the day, if I'm a company and I need to spend $45,000 to badge 1,000 people with a mobile credential over 3 years, as compared to potentially $20,000, sure, what's your security worth to you? I mean, tell that to the rural school district down in Mississippi, or the rural hospital in Western New York that doesn't have unlimited budget funds and can't just snap their fingers and magically make any security investments that they want to. We're not living in reality when we think that that's how our customers are purchasing. They're not. They want to make the best security decisions that they possibly can, but they only have so many resources to spend. It's just impractical to think that mobile credentials are going to replace physical credentials. And I feel like we've probably established it here. So mobile credentials might seem cool, but like I said earlier, so was that Furby that I really, really wanted in middle school. But the sweater that my parents gave me was way more useful to me at the end of the day. And even if mobile credentials are the coolest thing ever, if their biggest benefit is user experience, then the argument's just not that compelling. While it might be nice to use my phone instead of a badge to open a door, there's too many other sacrifices that would have to be made to migrate to that technology completely for most facilities to ever take the leap, which is why physical badges are definitely here to stay.